Now that your husband is gone, maybe you should stop giving such cheap-looking gifts, my granddaughter said as she held the small box in her hands. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the living room like a blade slipping through cloth. My son glanced at her, then at me, and said nothing. I felt the air shift, heavy, still, almost embarrassed to exist. I didn't argue. I didn't correct her. I simply folded my hands in my lap and watched her peel back the wrapping paper I had spent half an hour smoothing out so it wouldn't look rushed. She lifted the necklace, sterling silver, simple, classic, and held it like it was something she had found in a clearance bin. "This looks so cheap," she repeated, louder this time, as if she wanted the walls to hear. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and let me know what city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled." The fireplace crackled behind me, the kind of gentle sound that usually calmed my nerves. Not today. Not when I was sitting in the same house my late husband and I bought 38 years ago, the house where we celebrated every birthday, every holiday, every small victory life gave us. My granddaughter stood right where he used to hand her Christmas presents with that warm smile she adored. Yet here she was now, wrinkling her nose at something I had chosen with care. The living room was filled with people. My daughter-in-law arranging plates on the coffee table, my son adjusting the thermostat, my younger grandkids whispering near the hallway. But somehow I felt alone in the crowd. Completely alone. "This is why we said we'd handle the wedding decor ourselves," my daughter-in-law said softly, like she was trying not to sharpen the moment further. But the message was clear. I was outdated, inconvenient, unnecessary. I nodded, pretending the words didn't sting. At 74, I had learned to let silence shield me more than any comeback could. I watched my granddaughter toss the necklace onto the couch cushion and move on to a different gift, something expensive looking, wrapped with a glossy bow. She smiled at that one. She didn't even look back at mine. For a moment, I wondered if my husband would have spoken up. He always did. He would have cleared his throat, placed a steady hand on my shoulder, and said something calm but firm. Something that reminded everyone that I mattered. That I belonged. But he wasn't here. And the room felt colder without his presence crossing from memory to reality. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my cardigan. "If you all don't mind," I said gently, "I'm going to step into the kitchen for a moment." No one stopped me. No one even looked up. The kitchen lights felt brighter than necessary, almost harsh. I leaned against the counter, letting the quiet settle around me. The house had never felt so big or so empty. I glanced at the window overlooking the backyard, the same yard where my husband and I planted marigolds every spring. The same yard where my granddaughter used to run around barefoot when she was little, laughing until she fell into the grass. Somewhere along the years, she had traded that laughter for something colder, sharper, something that aimed at me now. I took a slow breath and straightened my back. They thought their words would break me. They thought I would shrink into the edges of the room and stay there. But they were wrong. Very wrong. And this time, I would choose my response carefully. Quietly. Just the way a woman like me learns to survive in a family that has forgotten how to love her. The kitchen felt colder than the living room, even with the oven still warm from the dishes I'd prepared earlier. I stood there for a moment, letting the quiet wrap around me the way a heavy coat does on a winter morning. No anger. No tears. Just that familiar hollow space where my husband's voice used to live. When he passed, the house didn't just get emptier, it changed shape. The walls felt farther apart. The nights stretched longer, and silence stopped being comforting. It became a reminder of what I had lost, of who I had lost, of how different everything felt without someone who used to see me, truly see me. After the funeral, the family filled this house for a few days, flowers everywhere, casseroles stacked in the fridge, people telling me to stay strong, as if grief was a task on a checklist. But once everyone returned to their own routines, the quiet settled in again, heavier than before. I remember waking up one morning to sunlight slipping through the blinds, and for a second, I reached out across the bed like I used to. My hand touched cold sheets. I pulled it back quickly, as if the cold had burned me. Ever since then, the house carried a different kind of stillness, One I tried to ignore by keeping myself busy. Rearranging the cabinets, wiping down the same countertops twice, folding towels that were already folded. The family noticed the difference too. They didn't say it directly, but I felt it. The way my granddaughter stopped dropping by just to talk. The way my son's calls grew shorter. The way my daughter-in-law began speaking to me like someone she needed to manage, not someone she cared for. And gatherings became performances. I would set the table, prepare dishes, straighten the cushions, all while knowing they would walk in with that polite smile people wear when they're not truly present. Tonight was no different. While I stood in the kitchen, I could hear muffled laughter from the living room. The kind of laughter that's warm when you're part of it, and unbearably cold when you're not. My granddaughter's voice carried above the others, light and cheerful now that she was done criticizing my gift. How quickly she changed tones, like flipping a switch. I leaned forward, resting my palms on the cool countertop. My reflection in the microwave door looked older than I remembered. Softer around the edges, more tired. Grief had a way of adding years faster than life itself ever could. But underneath the tiredness was something steadier. A kind of quiet strength that had carried me through harder days than this. Days when my husband was ill. Days when money was tight. Days when I held my family together by sheer will and love. I exhaled slowly. If they wanted to see me as fragile, as outdated, as someone who should simply stay out of their way, well, they didn't know me as well as they thought. I stood up straight, smoothed my cardigan, and walked back toward the living room, toward their voices, their expectations, and their assumptions that I would always stay small and silent. They had no idea what was coming. When I stepped back into the living room, no one noticed at first. They were too wrapped up in their conversations, their phones, their laughter. I stood there quietly, taking in the scene the way you study a photograph, observing details you didn't catch the first time. My granddaughter was on the couch, showing her fiancé the other gifts she'd received. She had neatly pushed mine to the far end of the cushion, half covered by a throw pillow. As if hiding it made it less real. As if hiding it made me less present. My son finally glanced up. "Mom, you okay?" he asked, but his eyes didn't hold concern, just obligation. The kind of question people ask because silence would feel too uncomfortable. "I'm fine," I said, and he nodded quickly, almost relieved that he didn't have to step closer or look longer. But even from across the room, I could see the small changes in their behavior. Little things that didn't seem important on their own, but carried weight when stacked together. My granddaughter's fiancé stood when she motioned him over, but he didn't acknowledge me. Not a hello, not a smile. He glanced at me only once, quick, dismissive, before helping her gather her things. They talked quietly, but not quiet enough. "I can't get married in a house that looks like this," she whispered, glancing at the aging walls and the old wooden trim my husband had varnished himself. "It'll be different once it's ours," he said. Ours. A single word. But it hit me harder than anything she'd said tonight. I kept my face still, but inside, something tightened. My daughter-in-law walked around rearranging small decorations as if she already owned the place, straightening frames, commenting under her breath about areas that needed updating. It wasn't the first time. She had done it before, gently nudging my son in conversations about future plans, assuming I wouldn't hear the subtext. My son, meanwhile, avoided my eyes every time she made one of those remarks. Like he agreed, or like he was tired of pretending he didn't. They all thought they were being subtle. They weren't. Later, as I gathered empty cups from the coffee table, I noticed something else. My granddaughter had placed a stack of wedding magazines on the armchair, the same chair where my husband used to read every evening. The top magazine was open to a page titled Rustic Home Weddings, Transforming Family Houses into Perfect Venues. So that was the plan. Not to include me. Not to honor tradition. Not to keep the house in the family. But to use the house. Then change it. Then take it. Every small behavior from the past few months clicked into place. My son asking casually, "Mom, have you ever thought about moving somewhere smaller?" My granddaughter saying, "It makes sense for the house to stay in the family after the wedding." My daughter-in-law recommending a real estate agent just to evaluate. None of it was innocent. I placed the last cup in the sink and wiped my hands on a dish towel. My heart felt heavier, but strangely sharper too, like a truth I had been avoiding was finally stepping into the light. They didn't want me here. They wanted the house. They wanted the life my husband and I built, not the woman who built it beside him. As I stood in the doorway, watching them laugh and plan and pretend I wasn't listening, something inside me settled. Not anger, not hurt, clarity. And clarity, at my age, is more powerful than any raised voice or argument could ever be. I smiled quietly to myself. If they believed they already knew the ending to this story, they were about to be very surprised. I didn't sleep much that night. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and keeps your thoughts awake whether you want them or not. I sat on the edge of my bed, running my fingers along the wooden frame my husband built when we first moved in. Every groove, every joint, carried a memory, a life lived, a life shared. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the sound of his voice. It had softened over the years, but it always held certainty when he talked about this home. He used to say, "This place will be our legacy, a roof for the people we love." I believed him. I still do. But I don't think he ever imagined that the people we love would someday treat that legacy like a stage backdrop for their perfect photographs. My mind drifted back to the first Thanksgiving we hosted here. My granddaughter was only 8. She sat on his lap, swinging her legs, asking him why the walls looked golden when the sun set. He laughed and told her it was because the house loved the light. She believed him immediately, her eyes wide with wonder. And now she looked at those same walls with disdain, calling them outdated and dull. Funny how quickly affection can sour when someone starts seeing a place as a transaction instead of a memory. I remembered the nights my husband and I spent repainting the living room, arguing lightly about whether the color was too warm or not warm enough. I remembered the birthday parties, the spilled juice on the rug, the smell of cinnamon rolls drifting through the hall during winter mornings. So many pieces of our story were woven into this home, and yet, somehow my family remembered none of it. Instead, they saw opportunity. They saw utility. They saw what they could take. I thought of my granddaughter's words again. "This looks so cheap." It wasn't just the gift. It was me. It was everything I represented, old, unnecessary, in the way. People don't say these things out loud, but their tone does. Their glances do. Their silence does. And the silence over the past months had said plenty. My son used to call me every other day. After my husband died, the calls shrank to once a week, then every 2 weeks, then mostly when he needed something. Documents, family recipes, access to the attic. My daughter-in-law always spoke with a smile that never reached her eyes, a polite sharpness beneath every word. My granddaughter, she changed the fastest. She used to bring me drawings, kisses on my cheek, ribbons for my hair. But the older she got, the more she seemed embarrassed by the simplicity of my life. She liked shiny things, big plans, big gestures, big houses she saw in magazines. Somewhere along the line, my home became too small for her dreams, but I never questioned her love. Not until recently. Not until all the little signs began lining up like breadcrumbs leading somewhere I didn't want to go. My granddaughter asking, "Grandma, do you really need all these rooms?" My daughter-in-law suggesting, "It might be easier for you to move closer to the city." My son hesitating before every answer, as if weighing what he could reveal. Pieces. Small, sharp pieces forming a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. I stood up and walked through the hallway, touching the walls as I passed. The house felt warm under my palms, steady, loyal, in a way people sometimes fail to be. My husband built this place to hold us together, but maybe things weren't meant to stay in one piece forever. Still, if this home was going to be taken from me, it wouldn't be through manipulation or behind closed-door conversations. If they wanted it, they would have to confront who I am. And I'm not the fragile woman they think I've become. I pulled the curtains closed and sat by the window, watching the moonlight stretch across the backyard. The wedding magazines left in my chair, the hushed conversations, the way they looked right through me, it all formed a single quiet conclusion. They had plans. But so did I. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely risen. and the house was still wrapped in that bluish-gray light that makes everything look softer, almost forgiving. I brewed a small pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the gentle ticking of the wall clock. That sound had become my steadier companion over the past year than most people in my life. As I sipped the coffee, I heard a familiar knock at the front door. 3 quick taps, then one slower one. Only one person knocked like that anymore. It was Martha, my neighbor for nearly 25 years. She had lived through every chapter of my life in this house. Holidays, storms, repairs, celebrations, losses. She was one of the few people who didn't treat me differently after my husband passed. She didn't tiptoe around my grief. She didn't speak to me like I was breakable. She simply showed up. I opened the door, and she stepped in with her usual morning energy, carrying a grocery bag with 2 muffins and a carton of orange juice. "Brought breakfast," she said. "You looked tired last night when I saw your lights on so late." I smiled, a real smile this time. "Thank you, Martha. Sit with me?" We settled at the table. She unwrapped a blueberry muffin and pushed it toward me before taking a bite of her own. For a few minutes, we just sat there in comfortable silence, the kind of silence only old friends can share without explanation. Then she cleared her throat. "I saw your family leaving last night. Looked like they were in a hurry." Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. Martha didn't miss much. "They were?" I said, breaking the muffin apart slowly. It was a long evening. She waited, not pushing, not prying. Just waiting, giving me space to speak if I wanted. I sighed. "My granddaughter didn't like the gift I gave her. Said it looked cheap." Martha stopped mid-bite. "She said that? Out loud?" I nodded. She set her muffin down, her expression tightening. "That girl used to sit on your lap and braid your hair with yarn. Now she talks to you like that?" "It's not just her," I said quietly. "They've been talking a lot about this house. Too much, asking questions, dropping hints, planning things they haven't said out loud." Martha leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "I had a feeling," she murmured. "Last week I heard your son talking on the phone outside. He didn't see me. Something about getting the place ready and how he hoped you'd be cooperative." A small chill ran through me. "How much did you hear?" I asked. "Enough," she said. "Enough to know they weren't thinking about you. Just the house." I stared down at my hands. The faint tremble wasn't from age, it was from realization. A truth I had sensed, but hadn't fully let myself accept, now stood in front of me with more shape, more weight. Martha reached over and placed her hand on mine. "Listen," she said softly. "You are not a burden. You are not someone they can sweep aside whenever it suits them. And this house? This is your life's work. Yours and your husband's. Don't let them take it just because they think you won't fight back." Her words landed with a steadiness I needed more than I realized. Someone finally saw what was happening. Someone understood. I nodded slowly. "I'm not planning to give them anything." Martha smiled, that knowing, slightly mischievous smile she had carried since the first day I met her. "Good," she said, "because I have a feeling they're counting on you staying quiet, staying gentle, staying predictable." I took a deep breath, feeling something shift inside me, something small but solid. "They're going to be surprised," I said. "Very," she replied. "We finished breakfast together, talking about ordinary things. The weather, the flowers blooming early this season, the neighbor's new dog. But under those simple exchanges lay a new foundation. A steadying presence. A reminder I wasn't as alone as I had felt. A reminder that even one ally can make all the difference when a family starts closing ranks against you." And as I walked Martha to the door, I realized something else. My family might believe they've already won. But they haven't seen me fight yet. That afternoon, after Martha left, the house felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but steadier, as if someone had quietly slipped a beam under a sagging floorboard. I moved through the room slowly, touching the backs of chairs, adjusting picture frames, letting myself feel every corner the way you do when you're preparing for a change you haven't spoken out loud. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from my son. "Mom, do you have a minute later? We want to talk about the house plans." He didn't even bother softening it anymore. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering, then set the phone face down on the table. I didn't need to respond. Not yet. Not before I was ready. Instead, I walked through the living room and began picking up the magazines my granddaughter had left behind. The ones filled with glossy pages of renovated farmhouses, string lights, wide porches, open floor plans, everything shiny and curated. I set them in a neat stack on the coffee table, the same spot where my husband used to place his tools after fixing something around the house. The contrast made me smile. Quietly. Bitterly. I could hear my husband's voice in my head. They don't build homes like they used to, but people don't cherish them like they used to either. He was right. As I stood there, my daughter-in-law's car pulled into the driveway. She didn't text. She didn't call. She walked right in the front door as if she already had a key to a future she hadn't earned. "Hi, Mom," she said, forcing brightness. "I was in the neighborhood." She wasn't. She lived 20 minutes away. I nodded, not offering more. I'd learned that silence made people reveal more than questions ever could. She glanced around the house, scanning every wall, every corner, every piece of furniture like she was making mental notes. "You know," she said lightly, "these old hardwood floors would look amazing once they're refinished. And the windows. Original, right? We could open them up, brighten the whole space." She said it so comfortably. I folded my hands. "This house doesn't need brightening." She gave a soft laugh. "Mom, everything can use a refresh, and with the wedding coming up, well, it just makes sense to get started soon, before things get too hectic." There it was again, the assumption, the entitlement. The quiet belief that I would step aside, hand over the keys, and let them build their dreams on the bones of my memories. I decided it was time to test the waters. "I haven't agreed to anything," I said calmly. She blinked, surprised. She wasn't used to pushback. "Well, of course not officially," she said, adjusting her scarf. "But we all know it's what's best. A wedding needs the right atmosphere, and afterward, we can help you move into something smaller. Something easier for you." The word smaller hung in the air like an insult disguised as concern. "I'm not moving," I said quietly. Her smile froze for a second. Just 1 second, but enough. "Oh, well, your son and I just thought it would be a good time to start planning, for everyone's benefit. Everyone's. Everyone except me." She walked toward the dining room, running her fingers along the table I had polished that morning. "We'd love to host the rehearsal dinner here," she continued. "It'll be so meaningful for the family." I watched her speak as if the house already belonged to her, as if I weren't standing there breathing in the same space, and something inside me settled even deeper. A decision taking shape. "I'll let you know," I said simply. She blinked again, twice this time. She hadn't expected resistance. She certainly hadn't expected boundaries. "Well, all right," she said, gathering her purse. "Talk to your son later. He'll explain everything." She hurried out, and when the door closed, the house exhaled with me. I walked to the window and looked out over the yard where my husband and I planted our first tree, the yard where our granddaughter once played, barefoot and carefree. The tree was taller now, its branches stretching farther than either of us imagined back then. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something like resolve settle into my bones. They thought they had me cornered. But they were wrong. I wasn't done yet. My son called that evening, just as the sun slipped behind the tree line, and the house took on that soft blue glow it gets at dusk. I let the phone ring twice before picking up, not out of pettiness, but because I didn't want him to hear even a hint of eagerness in my voice. He had grown too comfortable assuming I would always be available, always agreeable. "Mom," he said a little too brightly, "did you get my text?" "I did." A short pause. Just long enough for him to sense that my tone wasn't as pliant as usual. "Well, good. We were thinking maybe tomorrow afternoon we could come by and discuss the wedding arrangements. There's a lot to coordinate, and Meadow wants everything perfect." Meadow, my granddaughter, always wanted perfection, but only the kind she could pose for. I could picture her now, flipping through magazines, circling paint colors, imagining how the house would look if it were remodeled to fit her aesthetic. "I'm not free tomorrow," I said simply. Another pause, this one longer, heavier. "Well, we really need to start planning. The timeline is getting tight." "I understand," I said, "but I'm not free." He didn't know what to do with that answer. He wasn't used to it. "Well, all right. Maybe the day after? We'll see." Silence again, thick, awkward. Then his voice softened, slipping into that tone children use when they want something but don't want to reveal it. Mom, Meadow's really set on getting married there. It means a lot to her. I looked around my living room, the pictures on the wall, the lamp my husband bought from a yard sale, the quilt draped over the sofa that I had stitched during the winter he got sick. This house was made of memories. Her fantasy wedding didn't outweigh any of them. It means a lot to me too, I said. In a different way. He hesitated. We just want the best for the family. The best, I repeated quietly, seems to only include me when it's convenient. He didn't respond. Not because he didn't hear me, but because he did. Before he could gather a reply, the doorbell rang. Someone's here, I said. I'll talk to you later. I hung up before he could argue. When I opened the front door, I wasn't surprised to see Martha standing there, holding 2 envelopes in her hand. She looked determined, the same look she had the day she marched over to the HOA meeting and scolded the board for trying to fine her over a mailbox color that had been the same for 15 years. I thought you might need these, she said, stepping inside. What are they? One is a card from the lawyer who handled your husband's will years ago. You remember him? I nodded slowly. He retired. His firm didn't, she said, and they keep records, good ones. I took the envelope. It felt heavier than just paper. And the second? I asked. She smirked. A printout from the county website. Property records, details on ownership, transfer rules, protections for senior homeowners. You're not as vulnerable as they think. I set the envelopes on the table, not ready to open them yet. Sometimes the anticipation of truth is harder than the truth itself. Martha sat down, folding her hands. Your son and granddaughter, they've been talking. A lot. I heard them again this morning when they drove off. They think you'll go along to keep the peace. I looked down at the table's wooden grain, remembering the years my husband and I sanded and refinished it together, laughing when we realized we'd done the measurements wrong the first time. I used to think keeping the peace was the same as keeping the family, I said quietly. And now? Now I think keeping myself is more important. Martha exhaled, almost proudly. Good. It's about time you stopped letting them treat you like a placeholder. We sat in silence for a moment. A comfortable silence this time. Then I said what had been forming in my mind ever since the night before. If they want to take this house from me, Martha, they're going to have to face the fact that I'm still here. She nodded, her eyes warm but fierce. Then let's make sure they don't see you as someone they can push aside anymore. As she left, the house didn't feel empty. It felt ready. The next morning, I opened the envelopes Martha had brought. The house was silent except for the soft creak of the floorboards, old wood settling remembering. The first envelope held a list of contacts from the law firm that had handled my husband's estate. Names, numbers, office addresses. People who once knew our story. People who would remember it if I asked them to. The second envelope was thicker. County documents. Property laws. Notes Martha had written in the margins with her neat handwriting. She'd highlighted one sentence 3 times. Sole ownership cannot be transferred or altered without the consent of the primary title holder. In other words, they couldn't touch this house. Not without me. Not unless I allowed it. I sat with that information for a long moment, letting it settle inside me like warm tea spreading through cold hands. Around noon, my granddaughter texted. Grandma, can we come by today? Want to show my fiancé the backyard again. No punctuation. No greeting. Just an expectation. I didn't reply. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I knew who it was before I even reached the hallway. My granddaughter always pressed the button twice. Quick, impatient taps, like the world should hurry for her. When I opened the door, she stepped in without waiting, her fiancé behind her. They smelled like expensive cologne and coffee shop pastries. Grandma, we just wanted to take another look outside, she said, brushing past me. We're thinking of putting the archway right near the oak tree. The oak tree. The one my husband planted from a sapling. The one we watered through dry summers. The one that grew alongside our life. Her fiancé wandered through the living room, glancing at the furniture the same way he might look at pieces in a thrift store. Curious, detached, already imagining replacements. This wall could definitely come down after the wedding, he said casually. Open concept would be amazing. My granddaughter nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, we'll remodel everything once it's ours. Once it's ours. She said it like a fact, like a date on a calendar. I leaned against the doorframe and watched them walk through the house as if they were touring a property they'd already purchased. They moved things, opened cupboards, tapped the windowsills, evaluated. They treated my home like a project. Not a memory. Not a life. A project. We could even redo the floors before the ceremony, her fiancé continued, just to make the photos look cleaner. Cleaner, as if my life needed polishing for their camera lenses. My granddaughter turned to me then, hands on her hips. Grandma will need you to move your things out of the guest room soon. I need a place for my bridal stuff. She didn't ask. She told me. I looked at her. Really looked. Her polished smile, her expensive clothes, her rehearsed tone, her complete certainty that she could push me aside without consequence. Did your father talk to you yet? She asked. We have a plan that works for everyone. Everyone. Everyone but me. I straightened up slowly. I'm not moving anything, I said. She blinked. What? Grandma, don't make this difficult. This house isn't yours, I said calmly. Not now. Not later. Her fiancé laughed lightly, the kind of laugh people use when they think you're being quaint. Well, eventually it will be. These things pass down. Not this time, I replied. Their expressions shifted. Confusion first, then irritation, then the faintest edge of fear. Not fear of me. Fear of losing what they thought they already owned. My granddaughter stepped forward. Grandma, we've already planned everything. We told everyone the wedding would be here. That was your mistake, I said gently. She stared at me, lips parted, disbelief tightening her features. Are you saying you're not giving us the house? I'm saying, I replied softly, you should never plan a future around something that doesn't belong to you. The room fell quiet. No yelling. No drama. Just the sound of a truth settling where entitlement used to sit. They both stood there, stunned, as if the walls themselves had spoken. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the house standing with me, not as a possession, but as a witness to what came next. My granddaughter didn't say a word at first. She just stood there in the middle of my living room, staring at me as if I had spoken a foreign language. Her fiancé shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us like he was waiting for someone to break the silence. Finally, she exhaled sharply. Grandma, you can't be serious. I'm very serious, I said, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. She folded her arms, her mouth tightening into the same expression she used when a store clerk told her something was out of stock. So what are we supposed to do? We already told everyone the wedding would be here. That was your decision, I replied. Not mine. Her fiancé stepped forward, trying to insert himself with that overly polite confidence some young men wear like cologne. We're just trying to create a meaningful family moment, a legacy, something to honor your husband. I felt something in me harden at that. You don't get to use his name, I said quietly. He blinked, thrown off. My granddaughter looked away. I turned toward the window, letting a moment of stillness soften my tone. Outside, the yard was bathed in afternoon light, the oak tree casting long shadows across the grass. That tree had roots deeper than any of them understood. I'm not trying to be cruel, I said, but you've all been talking as if this house was waiting for you, as if I'm just a placeholder until the paperwork catches up. My granddaughter let out a small, frustrated laugh. Grandma, you're overreacting. We just want things to be nice for the wedding, and afterward, we'll make sure you're comfortable. That's all. Comfortable. The word landed wrong. Too close to managed. Too close to stashed away somewhere. I turned back to her. You want honesty? She crossed her arms tighter. Yes. All right, I said. Ever since your grandfather passed, you've all been treating this house like a prize you're waiting to collect. You come in, you point out what's outdated, what needs fixing, what would look better in your photos, but you never ask what the house means to me. You never ask what he meant to me. Her face softened. A flicker, a passing shadow, but it was too late to pull back from the truth. We thought, she started, then stopped. Dad said. I held up a hand. I know what your father said, and I've listened long enough. Her fiancé nudged her gently. Maybe we should talk about this later. No, she snapped. We came here to settle this. I stared at her. This young woman I had rocked to sleep, Bandaged knees for, baked cakes with, read stories to. The same girl who used to curl beside me on the porch swing and tell me she never wanted to grow up because grown-ups forgot how to love things simply. Somewhere along the years, she had learned how to want more than she was given and forget what she already had. You want closure? I asked. She nodded, chin lifted in challenge. Then listen carefully. I walked to the coffee table, picked up the wedding magazine she had left earlier, and set it gently into her hands. You may plan your wedding wherever you like, I said, but it will not be here. And this house will not be yours. Not for photos, not for remodeling, not for someday. She stared at the magazine as if it had suddenly gained weight. So you're choosing the house over your own family? She whispered. No, I said softly. I'm choosing myself over being used. Her fiancé touched her arm. Let's go. But she didn't move. Her eyes swept through the room, the walls, the shelves, the oak floors, the memories she never cared much for, like she was seeing it all for the first time. Or maybe like she realized it never belonged to her in the way she imagined. Finally, she placed the magazine back on the table. We'll talk later, she said stiffly. And they left, not storming, not slamming doors, but with a quiet tension that said they had expected an easy victory and walked away empty-handed. When the door closed, the house felt still. Not lonely, not heavy. Just mine. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I breathed without feeling someone else's expectations pushing against my ribs. They had come assuming I would surrender. But this time, I didn't. That evening, the house settled into a deeper quiet, one that didn't feel suffocating this time. It felt alert, as if the walls themselves were listening, waiting, bracing. I moved slowly through each room, not out of tiredness, but out of intention. Every photograph, every lamp, every scratch on the baseboards held a story my family seemed eager to erase. Not this time. I pulled out the small wooden box my husband kept in his desk, the one where he stored documents he considered important but not urgent. Inside were old insurance papers, handwritten notes, warranty receipts from decades ago, and tucked at the bottom, the original property deed. The ink had faded a little, but his signature was still strong and confident. Seeing it steadied something inside me. I set the deed on the dining table beside the county documents Martha had given me. My reading glasses slid down my nose as I compared them line by line, tracing over each clause written in the dry, flat language of legal assurance. The more I read, the more a quiet certainty grew. They couldn't force me out. They couldn't claim the house. They couldn't touch what wasn't theirs. Not now. Not later. Not ever. My phone buzzed. A text from my son. Can we talk tonight? Meadow's upset. I think we need to clear the air. Clear the air. What a polite way to say, convince you. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the law office number from the list Martha had given me. A woman answered, her voice warm but professional. When I gave her my husband's name, she paused. Oh, yes, I remember that estate file. Let me check something for you. I could hear her typing. Papers shuffling. A brief silence. Then she said, It looks like your husband left a note in the file, not part of the will, more of a personal directive. He requested it be shared with you if you ever reached out to us without family present. A personal directive. My breath caught for a moment. Can I come in tomorrow? I asked. Of course, she said. We'll be expecting you. When I hung up, I stayed seated for a long time staring at the kitchen wall where my husband used to hang his Sunday hat. I didn't know what he might have written, but I knew him well enough to understand one thing. He never left anything to chance. Not when it came to me. Not when it came to our home. As the sun dipped lower, shadows stretched across the floorboards, and I felt the familiar ache in my chest soften. Not vanish, just ease. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like something happening to me. It felt like something I could shape with my own hands. I brewed a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the last of the daylight fade across the yard. The oak tree shifted gently in the breeze, its branches swaying as if nodding in approval. My granddaughter and her fiancé thought they were planning ahead. My son thought he could nudge me into agreement. My daughter-in-law thought her tone could wear down my resolve. But they didn't know what I knew now. Tomorrow, I would walk into that law office alone. Steadier, stronger, carrying every piece of evidence I needed to reclaim the ground beneath my feet. They assumed I would be predictable, soft, silent. They assumed wrong. And the quiet satisfaction blooming in my chest told me one thing clearly. The next move belonged to me. The next morning, I dressed with the same care I used to have when my husband and I attended church together. Nothing fancy, just a clean blouse, a warm cardigan, and the small silver earrings he gave me on our 30th anniversary. I wanted to walk into that law office, not as someone's mother or someone's grandmother, but as myself, as the woman he trusted. The drive into town was quiet. The early light stretched across the road, pale and steady, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small behind the wheel. I felt present, aware, ready. The receptionist recognized my name instantly and guided me to a small conference room. A few minutes later, a gray-haired attorney stepped inside carrying a slim folder. "I'm Mark Thompson," he said, offering his hand. "Your husband worked with us for years." His voice had the kind of gentleness only people who've seen many life endings learn to carry. He sat across from me and opened the folder. "Your husband left a note in his file," he said. "It wasn't part of the legal documents, more of a message, a request." I folded my hands, steady. He slid a piece of paper toward me. My husband's handwriting, strong, slightly slanted, unmistakable. "If she ever feels pressured about the house, remind her it's hers, fully, completely. No one else gets a say. Help her protect it." My throat tightened, but no tears came. His words held me the way his hands used to, firm, reassuring, steady. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat softly. "Your husband also left instructions to notify us if there were signs of coercion from family. We can file protective measures if needed. You don't have to do anything today. Just know you have support." I nodded. "Thank you." When I left the office, the sun was higher, warmer. I drove home slowly, letting the weight of my husband's message settle into every mile. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my son's car was already parked outside. He was waiting on the porch, hands in his pockets, pacing. Something he did only when he was nervous. "Mom," he said as I stepped out of the car, "we need to talk. Meadow's really upset. She told me what happened." "I'm sure she did," I replied calmly. "She said you refused to help with the wedding, and that you said the house wasn't going to be part of the plan." "That's correct." He blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct answer. "Mom, why? This wedding is important. And the house, this house, would make it perfect. You know how much it means to her." I walked past him up the steps, unlocking the door. "Meaning," I said, "does not erase boundaries." He followed me inside, voice tightening. "We're just trying to make this easier for everyone." "For everyone except me," I said, turning to face him. His mouth opened, closed. He wasn't used to opposition, not from me. "Mom, are you really saying no?" "I am." He rubbed his forehead. "Meadow already told people she's getting married here. You're making her look irresponsible." I held his gaze. "She is irresponsible." His shoulders stiffened. I walked to the dining table and picked up the property deed, placing it between us. "This house is mine," I said. "Not a set piece, not a project, not a future inheritance, mine." He stared at the document as if seeing it for the first time. "Where did you get that?" he murmured. "Your father made sure I had everything I needed." His face shifted. Guilt, confusion, a flicker of something like fear. "Mom, we just wanted to help you." "No," I said quietly. "You wanted to help yourselves." Silence. Heavy. Revealing. Then I placed the final truth in front of him, steady and calm. "I am not hosting the wedding, and I will not be moving, and this house will remain in my name for as long as I choose." He swallowed hard. "Does Meadow know?" "She will soon enough." He sank into a chair, elbows on his knees, rubbing his hands together. "She's going to be devastated." "Better devastated now," I said, "than entitled later." The clock on the wall ticked once, twice, a third time. And then, finally, he whispered, I didn't realize how far things had gone. I didn't respond. Some realizations belong to the person having them. When he left, the house felt quieter than before, but not empty. It felt protected. It felt like mine again. My son didn't stay long after that. He left quietly, without the usual promises to call soon or talk later. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Not angry, not dramatic, just accepting. Or maybe stunned. I couldn't tell. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel responsible for interpreting his feelings. That weight finally slipped off my shoulders. I stood in the living room for a while, listening to the stillness. Not the lonely kind, the peaceful kind. The kind that settles into a place once truth has been spoken out loud. Later that afternoon, my granddaughter called. I let the phone ring until it reached voicemail. She didn't leave a message. She didn't call again. And strangely, that silence felt louder than any argument could have. I made myself a cup of tea and walked out to the backyard. The air was crisp, touched with the faint smell of pine from the neighbor's yard. The oak tree, the one my husband planted from a sapling, stood tall and steady, its branches moving gently in the breeze. I rested my hand against its trunk, feeling the rough bark beneath my fingertips. For a long time after my husband passed, I thought this house felt too big for me, too quiet, too full of memories. But standing there, the late afternoon sun laying soft light across the yard, I realized something else. It wasn't too big. My world had simply gotten too small, shrinking under the weight of expectations that weren't mine to carry. I sat on the porch steps, sipping my tea, letting my thoughts settle like leaves floating to the ground. I wasn't angry anymore, not even hurt. Just clear. My family had mistaken my gentleness for weakness. They had mistaken my quiet for surrender. They had mistaken my love for permission. But this house wasn't theirs to claim, and my life wasn't theirs to arrange. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I felt a steadiness in my chest I hadn't felt since before my husband got sick. A sense of anchoring, a sense of knowing who I was again, without their voices drowning mine out. A car slowed near the driveway. For a moment, I thought it might be my granddaughter coming to plead, to negotiate, to try one more angle. But the car kept going, disappearing down the road. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Inside the house, I turned on the lamp with the warm yellow glow, the one my husband always used when he read in the evenings. The living room looked soft, lived in, familiar. Mine. I sat in his old chair, the cushion still shaped to him after all these years. I traced the armrest with my hand and whispered, "I handled it." The words felt strange on my tongue. Not prideful, just certain. He would have understood. He always did. Before going to bed, I locked the doors, not because I felt afraid, but because it felt right. Like closing a chapter gently but firmly. Upstairs, the house didn't creak as much as it used to. Or maybe it did, but tonight it sounded like settling instead of warning. Like the old bones of this place were relieved, I finally stood up for both of us. In the dark, under the quiet hum of the ceiling fan, I let myself feel the calm spreading through every part of me. No more waiting for someone to show up with demands. No more shrinking to keep the peace. No more letting the house feel like borrowed space. Tomorrow would come with whatever it brought. Maybe apologies. Maybe distance. Maybe nothing at all. But tonight, I had something better than their approval. I had my home, I had my voice, and I had myself, fully, firmly, quietly restored. The story didn't end the way they imagined. It ended the way it needed to, and it finally felt like mine.